Dear God, we thank you so much for the blessing of the Sabbath. We thank you, dear God, for being able to meet all of us as a family. And we thank you, dear Lord, that we get these opportunities to be able to discuss more about what concerns our salvation and your workings. We ask, dear God, that you be with all of us as we are going to go through this study. May you also speak to us, and may we speak to each other and learn from each other. I pray, dear God, that you be with everyone, those that are on their way, and for those that are also struggling in different ways. We pray and ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so I'm going to look at a subject or thoughts that I've been having in my mind. And to be honest, I want us to be able to explore the subject together because I also have questions. And so that means I don't have the answers, and I also don't have like a robust understanding of the subject itself. So basically, what I'm going to try and look at is the subject of God's government, or if I can say God's government, or how God has worked with humanity over the time, but it's also encapsulated in the story of the great controversy, right? So we I invite people to bring in their thoughts, and we'll try and make it as much interactive as possible. Yeah? Just want to confirm that people can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay. I want to try and share screen. Could I ask that my other devices? Can I share screen without being a host? Is that possible?
Yes, I
Yeah,
think so.
you should be able to do that.
Oh, okay. Right. I haven't presented in a very long time, so. And the last time I presented, I was using a physical whiteboard, so I'm trying to figure things out as we go. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes, Charity.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so like I said, it's within the context of the story of the great controversy that I'm going to look at this subject. And one of the reasons why I want to see it that way is because, I guess for me, in my mind, I want to understand the subject of how God works in connection with institutions or government within the story of the great controversy. Okay. So we'll start off by basically understanding the purpose of an institution in general without really attaching it to God. And then we can try and see how that works when it comes to God's government. So if anyone wants to tell me institutions, I want basically to try and understand what an institution is and what the purpose of the institution is. Right. So if we look at what an institution is, maybe we can start with synonyms. Anyone to give me synonyms of an institution? I don't know if people understand what a synonym is. Basically, other
Organization.
names or words. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Organizations, company structure, buildings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Buildings. Okay.
Yeah. That's that. I mean, yeah.
Organization.
In the context, you mean organization, companies.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else?
Group. I like group, fellowship, body.
Group. Okay.
And I think
Fellowship.
I think Elder Paminda said an institution in his mind was law. Well, I don't think you're going there.
Okay. It can be part of it. It just maybe if you can explain to me what that is in connection with an institution, how that would be seen, if you know.
You mean law?
Yes.
How did you see the meaning of law with regards to the study of Elder Paminda? Make sure
No,
my
no,
answer.
no, not in the study, but in the context of what we're talking about.
In the context of institution. So I'm not sure what you're going to talk
Yes.
about yet.
No, it's okay. You don't have to know what I'm going to talk about. I just want to see how that comes in.
Government as well can be an institution.
Yes. Yes, a government.
And in terms of law, it can be something that is established, like the marriage institution, you know.
Okay.
So a marriage institution has laws that govern it. So I'll talk about the marriage institution in Zimbabwe. If you get married, it's no longer called Chapter 37. I think it's 2 something something the code. It has laws that bind the two participants of that marriage institution they've entered into. So, for example, if I cheat on Marshall, Marshall can sue the person I'm cheating with and can sue me as well. You know, it's got laws and regulation. If I die, Marshall can be the sole inheritor of the things we have worked together for, together. So laws can be an institution in that sense. They're governing laws for a certain institution like marriage.
Okay. Okay. So basically what we are identifying is that with every institution there is governing laws. Yeah?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So institutions basically have governing laws. Yeah. So that's an important point.
Sorry, Charity, I
Right,
dropped
so-
out. Were you asking for me? I dropped out.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Okay.
I
So
just wanted to add about institutions with regards to law, that they introduce laws, and institutions
Okay.
introduce laws.
yes, so basically it goes along with what Rose just said. Probably you didn't hear it because you're out. Just speaking of how every institution has governing laws. So that's something that's, I guess, fundamental to every institution. Yes. So other synonyms that I could find are things, words like alliance, you have associations, etc.
Practice, customs.
So, pardon?
Practice and customs is also a synonym.
Practice and customs. Practice and customs. I don't know which one is practice. Okay.
Practice is the application of something.
Okay. So, okay. And then, yeah. So now, when we look at every institution, we have already identified something that we see within an institution. We have governing laws, right? And then what else do we find in an institution? Because it's speaking to an organized body, right? An institution is basically an organized body. So that, to me, that sounds like there's a form of organization that you find there, right?
Charity, can you actually read the chat? Or do you want me to read out?
Okay.
Can you see it? Can you see it?
You can read it out. Yes, I can.
Oh, you can see it. Okay.
But you
right.
can read them out.
Yes, God's law and governance. Institutions also is a mental hospital. Companies can only make internal laws only. Governments can make laws.
Oh, okay. So that's speaking to the scope of the institution, right, Manjit?
Yes, depending on how we define institution. I was only messing around with the mental hospital, although mental hospitals are called institutions. But companies, organizations can make laws that only govern within themselves. But then you have legal governments that then make laws that show how organizations and companies have to govern. So we call that corporate governance. So you have two types of laws: internal laws and external laws. So depending on how you define institutions also governmental ministries, Department of Health,
Okay.
Department of Education, those kind of things.
Okay.
And they're governed, obviously, or they're under the national laws of how they operate and how they govern. That was the point I was making. Yeah.
All right, thank you. That's an interesting point as well, because I think for me, how I'm actually seeing it from the point that you brought out is that it's speaking to how far the institution, how far reaching the institution is, right? So we'll give an example. We have a country, right? I don't know if we can say they're fractals, or we can see them in that sense of being fractals, or they're just the scope is the scope of the institution and how far it can go. So we have, okay, maybe we can start basically with like the earth, right? With the earth, there is governing bodies that have made laws that are supposed to be followed or kept by every nation in the world, right? I don't know if it's correct for us to put like the UN as a big governing body that governs the whole earth or all nations in the world. Can we agree to that or not? Someone?
Not well. It's difficult because the United Nations, in many aspects, doesn't have any authority over anything. So I mean, the idea was that all the nations come together and form universal laws, but that's not really working.
Yes, but
But that was the
conceptually we can
intention.
use
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So I do.
Conceptually we can use it, isn't it? Yes? Yes, Andres?
I don't know. I don't know if you can see hands or
Yes, ma'am.
do we just unmute?
Oh, I can't see hands. I think because I'm not a host, so
Okay.
I can't
Well,
see
I'll let you
hands.
know when people put their hands up there. Okay.
Okay. All right. Go on, Andres.
Yeah. So I think what I was thinking is that I think that the core concept of an institution, in the terms of what what the purpose of those constructs, social constructs or structures are, I see it as being as you were saying with they have governing laws because their purpose is to influence or shape a certain aspect um, of the individuals that are part of that institution. So I I guess to whatever level to whatever level the institutions are built to, whatever the scope of them is, they're set up to influence or shape the culture of the individuals, or
Okay.
the behaviors or the structures that they are formed by.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. So like you're saying, I'm going to try and illustrate in the way that I am thinking of it in my mind. So we have this being okay, maybe I won't use the UN, but I wanted to use it as an example to make it something that we can relate to. So we have an universal institution, right? So this is the universal institution. And this universal institution, it's universal. By universal, we're speaking about Earth, right? And then within the Earth, we have countries, right? We have different countries. And with each country, so this is a country. So each country also has an institution or is an institution, right, that governs the, or that has, yeah, that governs everything connected to that country, right? Because it can be people, it can be the environment, it can be companies, it can be other smaller organizations, right? So I'm just going to try and put it simple like that. So with this universal institution, it's basically governing the different countries, right? And these different countries are supposed to abide by the laws of this universal institution. Someone was wanting to say something.
Natalie's got her hand up.
Is it
Okay.
is it a bit, is it a bit like the United States and then the states within the United States?
Yes.
It's not universal, but
Yes.
it's a similar construct.
Yes. So yes, that's what I'm trying to illustrate. So basically, like you're saying, Natalie, you have the country, the United States, and then of course you have states, and then we'll just put those smaller circles. I'll just try and put them in here. Smaller circles, and then these can be the states, like you said. But within each state as well, you have other institutions. Now we can go to different institutions like, associations, companies, different organizations and groups, right? I hope we get the what I'm trying to bring out. So
Charity.
within the states, then you have the different companies. Yes.
You know, like if you do a parable, if you do internal, like the institution of our movement, and then you've got different countries, then you've got different organizations within it. You've also got, like, organizations like Eden to Eden and different ministries. So it sounds a bit like that, if you know what I mean. There's different
Yeah,
levels.
yeah.
You've got the institution, you've got the main institution, which is the movement, then you've got all the countries, then you've got within those countries, you've got other sort of separate institutions like ministries.
Yeah,
That's what I think of.
exactly. So basically we're getting the point of what I'm trying to illustrate. So now when we look at this, when we look at how human beings are basically organized into these different institutions, or there's these different institutions that people subscribe to, we can basically see how, for me, it brings out like a highlight of how this particular concept of an institution becomes important in the existence of humanity, right? If we can agree with that.
Yeah, Charity, I want when you said that people subscribe to, what I was thinking is that sometimes people don't, or I don't know what you mean by subscribe. Because like, for example, in a country, if we think about the US as a country, I guess you're born in that country and you don't really have much choice to say, oh, I want to actually subscribe to this institution, this country thing. Then I mean, you could then shape it or try to change it or as an individual, but how much choice do you have, or what do you mean by subscribe?
Okay. Okay, I was using it loosely. Um I just wanted to identify that there's different institutions that people are associated with. Maybe that's a better word.
Okay.
That's good. But again, I think it brings out an important aspect to these different institutions, right? To me, it's also telling me that with the different institutions that we have, there are those institutions that people are a part of by choice, and those institutions that people are a part of, I don't know, not by choice. I don't use the word arbitrarily. It's like you just find yourself. automatically. Yeah,
That's
maybe.
by default.
Yes, exactly. So, okay, I'm going to put that down because I find that interesting as well. So there's two types of institutions as well, right? No, that's not. So you have these two types of institutions. I wonder if there can be an institution that has both. I'm just wondering in my mind. So you have institutions that people join voluntarily, and then ones that people they're in by default, right? So I think that's an interesting point. So now, so when we now go to the story of the great controversy, it would only make sense to, like, from what we are seeing and what happens on earth, we have these different institutions and um, governing bodies, right, that are there for a particular purpose, and they have all different scopes that they reach, and they have a particular job function, right, that they have. And then now you have the story of the great controversy, right? And in the story of the great controversy, I just want us to go back to when the great controversy began. Yeah. And when, even before that, before the great controversy began, do we see an institution that existed, or it's something that we then see we in the earth, or it's something that then came later? If people understand what I'm saying. Institution, did we have an institution in heaven before the rebellion, or it's a phenomena that we see with humanity and after sin?
My charity, I think there was an institution because Lucifer was actually rebelling against that institution, you know. He was questioning and challenging the order and laws that God was using to govern the heavenly hosts. So if you read the Great Controversy, that's Lucifer's argument when Lucifer addresses other angels, both fallen and unfallen. Lucifer portrays that God is not running this institution correctly. God is oppressing them, and Lucifer presents himself as the one that can rescue the heavenly hosts. So there was governance, there was an institution before rebellion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
So
I was going to say, and we can
yes,
see
go
that.
on.
We can see that. You're asking about on the earth as well. I would say that if you read Romans 13, which I put in the chat, God talks to us about how the institutions that He set up, that we are to follow them, because God has set up these institutions. I think yeah. If you read Romans 13, I think that's a good explanation of how God wants us to interact with the institutions that he set up on the earth as well, because obviously that's the example that he's setting up in, well, most of it is in heaven, but we are to submit to authorities. If you read Romans 13, it explains it all.
Okay.
You see where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Debbie. I'm going to ask someone if someone is able to post one SP 20.1. And then someone to read it as well.
Emma, would you be able to do that? I can't do it on my device, please.
I was just trying to. I can't.
Yeah, I can't. It won't do it on mine.
One SP Spirit Prophecy.
20.1.
One SP 20. It's not coming up in my search box.
Oh, you can't find it? Let me see if I can get something.
I know it doesn't say.
But I have.
Oh, you know
to
why I
check.
can't find it? Sorry, I'm not in the right. I'm in Pioneers. I'm fine.
Okay.
That's my fault.
I can read it out because I've got it.
Okay.
Do you want all of it read? All of it read.
I'll just post it in a sec.
Satan refused to listen. That one.
Satan refused.
Yeah, Satan refused to listen.
Yes.
Okay, so Satan refused to listen, and then he turned from the loyal and true angels, denouncing them as slaves. These angels, true to God, stood in amazement as they saw that Satan was successful in his effort to excite rebellion. He promised them a new and better government than they had, in which they would all be, which all would be freedom. Great numbers signified their purpose to accept Satan as their leader and chief commander. As he saw his advances were met with success, he flattered himself that he should have all the angels on his side, and that he would be equal with God himself, and that his voice of authority would be heard in commanding the entire host of heaven. Again, the loyal angels warned Satan and assured him what must be the consequence if he persisted. And Satan, he who could create the angels, could by his power overturn all their authority, and in some signal manner punish their audacity and terrible rebellion. To think that an angel should resist the law of God, which was as sacred as himself. They warned the rebellious to close their ears to Satan's deceptive reasonings, and advised Satan and all who had been affected by him to go to God and confess their wrong for even admitting a thought of questioning God's authority.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie. Right. So I guess in this case, this is basically the story of the rebellion of Satan, right? We're not going to consider the whole story of the rebellion, but I found something interesting as well that was there. That when Satan was in the work of trying to convince the other angels, he also made a promise that he was going to have a new and better government than they had, in which all would be freedom. So basically, what I want to pick up from is that you have Satan promising a government. So basically, what that tells us, for me, I guess, without getting into the detail of the whole chapter, is that there is already a government that exists. Right? Maybe we'll just identify them differently as you have God's government. And then you have Satan's government. So this is basically the establishment of Satan's government, right?
Pharisee,
Yes.
I was thinking that this is a rejection of hierarchy and a promise of another structure, another government, which gives you false freedom.
Yes. So basically, it's sort of like Satan is doing a campaign, right? And with that campaign, he is basically identifying, if I can say, policies that are going to be a part of the government that he wants to establish, right? So there's something else I wanted to identify. Yeah, there's when we look at institutions as well, we see that we identify that there's a form of organization. So I think that also speaks to leadership, right? Within that form of government, right? And then in this case, what we have, God, yes, Satan is now creating two groups. That's true, Debbie. And you have God bringing forward Christ, right? Michael, Christ, and letting everyone know of the role that Christ plays within that government, right? And then Satan is not happy with that. So what is he going to do? Because he sees that he's not going to be able to, I guess maybe if we can say he was short-sighted, he couldn't see how him, okay, Christ, I mean, Satan being as they are, or Lucifer being who they are, they didn't realize that, or rather, Lucifer thought that there would be the better candidate or the better placed to take up that position than Christ, right? So because they realized that, okay, it's not going to be like that, this is unfair, they're not happy with it, they rebel, tell the other angels, and then soon enough Lucifer realizes that, okay, with what I want or desire, it's not going to work with government that God has in place. So we need to have a different type of government altogether. Why? Because in that government, I'm going to take up a higher position than what I have already, right? I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah. Can I just ask you a question, because I can't remember. Which was the point when, because we always know there was hierarchy there, but it was sort of like, and Lucifer, Satan didn't see it at first. It was only at a point that Lucifer realized that the position of Christ, of Jesus, of Christ. So can you remember, Charity, what that point was when Lucifer seen that? It was a meeting, wasn't it, that he wasn't allowed in or something? I remember we studied it
Yes,
recently.
I think it was at I don't know if I can say the inauguration, at the time when Jesus was brought forward and God conferred the title that they did on Christ. I think it should be,
Okay.
The
yeah,
coronation.
yes, the coronation,
Okay.
exactly,
Thank you. I
or
couldn't
the
remember.
anointment. Yes,
Thank
that's at the point, because remember, Lucifer was second in command, right? Was second in command, if I'm not mistaken. And then when Christ is anointed or goes through that coronation, Lucifer realizes that, okay, so it's not just going to be me. Rather, he felt like he was losing his position, or he was becoming lower than Christ, and he didn't
Uh,
want that.
Thank you.
Yes.
When you say coronation, what event are you referring to?
Okay.
Okay, so can I say something? I'll
Yes.
try and look for the quotation, but then I think Lucifer was not allowed into the councils of the creation of humans, I think.
Yeah, and that was because of his rank.
Yes. And then God decides to make it public. So I don't know whether we can, for this purpose, for the purpose of this study, to not make it sexism or what, when we try to define the three entities of the Godhead. If you allow me, so it's not out of sexism, but maybe a lack of how to distinguish the three persons of
Okay.
the Godhead. So I think that God the Father decides to publicly to the angelic hosts declare Christ what and his position, you know. So Ellen White calls that more like a coronation. You know, where I think it's rightfully placed where the role of Christ as compared to Lucifer, because Lucifer thought he was beautiful enough to enter into the council of the three persons of the Godhead. I don't know how I might say that without sparking controversy, but that's the best I can. I'll try and look for the quotation and I'll share.
Okay. I think it's 1 SP 17.1 and 2. That's where the story begins, because the first paragraph it speaks about Lucifer and the position that he held in heaven, and that he was describe how Lucifer looked and the form and everything, and that before the rebellion, he was high in command and exalted next in honor to God, basically to Christ, right? And then paragraph 2 speaks about how God assembled the heavenly host so that they could present to all the angels Christ, right? So Christ was being conferred special honor. That's what Ellen White says.
Is that
And
what you
that's
meant
what
by
sparked the
coronation?
jealousy. Yes.
Because so the way I understand the story is that that event, that coronation of Christ, was not the cause of Satan's unhappiness, but it was the consequence. So because of how the dynamics were before that point, because Christ had that role before that point, Satan wasn't happy, and then tried to take or ignore Christ's or take over that role. And because they didn't try to do that, then God actually went and confirmed what the role of Christ was. So God saying, like, I know Satan is trying to take over, but I just want to remind you that Christ is the one that has this role.
Okay. From how I understand the story, yes, Christ was always equal with 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 God the Creator. Well, I don't know if I can say God the Creator, with God, right? But before that, the angels didn't know. They didn't know. Um, they didn't know that. So it came to a point where God had to clarify that, or to make it known to them at that particular time. For I'm sure it was for a reason that God decided to make it known to the other angels, because before that, I think it shows also that Lucifer, the other angels had always seen that there's something about Jesus, right, about Christ, but they didn't know how how preeminent or how important Jesus was, right? And this is what God was trying to do.
Yeah,
So
but
when that is made known to the angels, Satan then becomes envious and jealous.
yeah, but I think that the jealousy came. So the reason I'm saying that they did know before this is because Christ was meeting privately with God, and Lucifer wanted to be part of those meetings, and God said no. And so like everyone saw that there were meetings that only Christ could go to, where God would tell God's purposes to Christ or to Jesus, and all of that happened before God announced like the coronation thingy. Um, so that's why I'm saying that the jealousy came from that, not from the coronation itself. It came from the private meetings, and Lucifer wanting to access to that private meeting that they had.
Okay.
Charity, I think Andres is coming from a cause to effect point to say because Christ was entering into councils with uh, God, I don't know, again, God the Father, and all that those three, they're entering into councils that were not inviting Lucifer in as well. Lucifer felt he qualified, because of his beauty, his majesty, and all. But then there are special councils Lucifer could not get into. And Christ, who was not beautiful in any way compared to Lucifer, Christ was never described the way Lucifer was described in terms of beauty, but that Christ was entering into councils only with God the Father. So Lucifer was jealous. I think, he even showed bitterness. And because of that, God had to publicly declare who Christ was. So it's more like a cause to effect, because Lucifer can't get into the councils, his jealousy, and the effect is the coronation. So the thing is, Lucifer, we could say he privately was jealous because it was not yet publicly open as well to every other angelic host. But the moment God makes it also public that Christ is my equal, Lucifer also goes public. You understand? So I think that's why maybe there's so much emphasis on the coronation, because it now becomes public. So if something is manifested inside, and then it then eventually becomes public. So what's manifested inside you or me right now, we might not know it. We only know it when we go public. And of course, God is all knowing, so he knew it prior. But for the rest of the angelic hosts, I think they were equally shocked why Lucifer is becoming so jealous of Christ. And if you continue reading in that paragraph, the angels tried so much, to reason with Satan, with Lucifer, to say, look, Christ deserves this, accept it, because Lucifer had now gone public. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think I understand what you're saying.
Blessing left the quote that is really good and says it all, really.
Okay.
On the
Yes, I just opened it. Yeah, that's okay. Anyway, that's not where my point and my discussion is going. So, Andres, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave that one for now. So, I want to focus on the issue of the institutions and the two types of government and the whole idea of actually having a government, right? So, so we have at this point, when the rebellion happens and Satan comes to a point where they decide they are going to establish their own government, right? That is uh, in against God's government, yeah. And so when Lucifer is then, so basically from the question that I asked before, we can see that there was a government in heaven before the rebellion happened, right? And then when the rebellion happens, basically we have another form of government being established, right? And in this sense, these two institutions, if we were to look at the scope of these two institutions, how do we place them? If you remember, we spoke about the different types of institutions that we have and the scope and how these different institutions have different job functions. So when we look at these two types of governments, how do we place them? If you can understand what I'm asking. Can we say they are universal institutions?
Can you just give a one-liner of your question? I didn't understand the question.
Okay, so I remember we spoke about the different institutions earlier, right? And I drew this illustration where we have the different types of institutions, right? And these are governing institutions or bodies that have different scopes. We have the universal institution that governs the whole of the earth. And then we have institutions that govern, their jurisdictions would be the country, right, in which they're established in. And then within the countries, you also have different institutions that also govern a certain aspect, whether we can say it's a state or it's a company or it's a environmental organization or it's a a charity organization, and they have specific works that they have. So in the same way, I want to us to be able to name the type of institutions that these are. Does anyone understand what I'm asking?
I think you're trying to say, is God's government and Satan's government universal or something else?
Yes. I'm actually trying to understand it or place it as well. Well, maybe we can say they're universal if we agree. And how I'm thinking of it is, by universal in this sense, it's not just covering the earth. It's covering all created beings, all that has ever been created, right? So
I think God's government's universal, but Satan's isn't, even though he'd like it to be, isn't it? Satan's is limited to earth, isn't it? I don't know what you
that's
think.
what I want to actually understand.
Okay. Okay, I guess the pitfall or the challenge with that is he's ruling the fallen angels, and where do we put them? Are they all confined to earth? Is that how we would describe it? Because they haven't got influence in the rest of the universe, have they? I don't think.
Okay. So I guess we can place it that way. The
I would
difference
say
is that
I would agree with Elder Emma, but I also think that the whole universe is watching what's happening with the two governments. But I agree that Satan was given rule over the earth, not the heavens. But the whole universe is watching the outcome of this. It's not ended, the great controversy.
Like Trump.
So,
Everybody's
yeah.
watching Trump. Actually, is he confined? No, he's not quite the same. It feels he's not confined to America. He's reaching out and touching other places, but I don't know if we could say
That's the thing, because when we speak about Trump, whatever happens with the Trump administration, it's going to affect the entire world. Because when you look at, like, for example, other far right parties that are all over the world, they are gaining, and authoritarian regimes, they are gaining strength from the Trump administration succeeding, if you get what I'm saying. So I'm wondering about that as well. But anyway, what I'm maybe let's just say, let's agree to put it as a universal, for universal governments, both of them. And then if we meet something along the way that's going to challenge that, we can change it. Yes? Can we agree to that?
Yes.
So say,
Because the purpose of study, right, really is if we meet anything that questions our position and it makes sense, we change. So yeah, let's
yes.
not be afraid to.
So this one is universal, and that one will say it's also universal. And for those that are well versed in methodology, I hope you can also help us with that, right? By compare and contrast, or whichever other type of methodology that we can use. Right. So from there, this is when Satan's government is, we have the beginning of it being in heaven, right? So begins rebellion, and this is heaven.
Gary, can I
Right.
ask why you put government and not institution? Because they are different in a sense. One's a social construct. Yeah.
The reason why is because of the quotation, but at the same time, that's why I looked at institutions at the different synonyms. So
Okay,
government is also
they
a
can overlap
synonym.
a little bit. Yeah, so we could go along
Yeah,
with
so
it being government.
so it just depends on the type of institution.
Okay.
So yeah, if you understand what I'm saying. So if it's a company, it is an institution. It can also have like a governing body, you know, and things like that. So it just depends on the type of institution that it is.
Yeah, and you're looking
Yeah.
at hierarchies, so they both have hierarchies. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an aspect of it. Okay, so
Blessing has his
so
hand up, Chad.
now,
Blessing has his hand
yes,
up.
there's a,
Let Debbie
oh,
introduce
okay. Sorry, I can't see the hands. Yes, go on.
I wanted to comment on your premise of both governments being universal. And how I propose to do that is by pointing our attention to Daniel chapter 11, verse 3 and 4. So Daniel 11, 3 and 4 is the story of Alexander the Great. And I won't really read it because I think we know it. Mighty King stands up, that rules everything. And then verse 4 says, when Alexander is standing up, basically establishing his power, his kingdom will be broken. So what we normally do is we go into the history and we actually say, in reality, it took 22 years to break up Alexander's kingdom into four, because verse 4 says it's divided into four. That was a 22-year process. And Elder Tess gave us what I thought was a neat explanation of the concept, and actually said what Daniel was doing in verse 4 was identifying a cause at the beginning and an effect at the end. So the effect is the division of the empire into four. So you actually have different kings ruling different portions of the universal kingdom of Greece. And then the cause of that is the death of Alexander, who had ruled everything, right? And what we say is that, what we say is that it was still considered to be intact because of Antigonus. So Antigonus didn't control everything the way Alexander did in terms of reality and geographical, spheres of influence or geographical territory. Antigonus wasn't the recognized ruler of everything. But Antigonus had the same ambitions as Alexander the Great, and we make them equal, right, for prophetic purposes. So to all intents and purposes, it seems that what we're identifying is, if all things held constant, if nothing had stood in the way of Antigonus, if Antigonus hadn't died, Antigonus was going to be like Alexander. Antigonus was going to control everything. So because of that recognition, we identify Antigonus and Alexander as the same person, that they're the same, right? So I'm saying we can take that concept and apply it in the same way to Lucifer and Christ or God, that God is a universal kingdom and Lucifer wants to establish the same. The fact that Lucifer doesn't have everything is irrelevant, because the type of ruler that Antigonus was different to the rulers that Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus were. Because these four rulers were content with having their own portions of territory and coexisting. Right? I'm not saying they were friends, but all they wanted is their little patch here and another patch there. They were content with that. That's what they wanted. Antigonus didn't want that. Antigonus wanted everything. And I think that's what we are saying about Lucifer and God, that God's government is hegemonic, it's universal. Satan's government is the same, because that's what Satan wanted. That's what Satan set out to establish. So the fact that Satan only has a portion of that empire is irrelevant to the story. To all intents and purposes, they are the same. So God and Lucifer are the same way that Alexander and Antigonus are the same, even though geographically the story was different. So that's what I wanted to say about that.
Okay, thank you. So basically, I guess we'll see that when I don't know how territory is spelled. So basically what we're saying is that Lucifer, when they establish their kingdom, or has this concept of beginning or establishing a different government from God's, the intention was for it to be universal. It has to go to all created territories, just in the same way that God's government also covers all created territories, right? So we'll see that eventually Lucifer is able to get a bit of that territory. But I think through that one place that Lucifer is able to establish their kingdom, they will be able to do a work that affects the whole universe.
Charity, if you look at Isaiah 14:14, I think that Lucifer says that God says, I will send you say you will ascend above the heights of clouds, I will be like the Most High. Yeah, so he does want the whole world, like Latin says, and the heavens.
Exactly. Okay. So now we're going to try and trace the story of these two governments on earth, because that's where we are, of course, as human beings. And we want to understand it because this is where Satan was able to establish his government successfully, right? So I'm going to, I'm realizing time is going, but we'll try and do the best that we can. So basically, God establishes a kingdom on earth, right? And we see this at creation, right? And with the creation, God has Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are part of that kingdom and they're part of that government. Yes. And where can we place, when can we place the establishment of Satan's kingdom on earth? Someone?
After sin, after Adam and Eve sinned.
Yeah.
Exactly. So basically, when the fall happens, Satan, like what Satan was doing in heaven, was trying to hijack a government that was already in place, right? And make it their own. And this is one of the reasons why Satan had to be cast out of heaven together with the angels, right? So we see the same thing happening as well with Lucifer or Satan when they come on earth. God has already created earth, and Satan basically hijacks
Yeah, he uses deception.
that.
He uses deception
Exactly.
to do that. Yeah.
Yes. And the reason why is because we know that Satan is not able to create in the same way that God can. But Satan is able to manipulate what has already been created by God, right? Already we are seeing these two types of governments as they are going and how different they are. God creates, Satan is not able to create something of their own. So what does Satan do? He hijacks Eden or earth. Let's just say Eden, right? So now after after the fall happens, so here with the story of God, basically in the government of God, we have a fall that occurs. And then after the fall, how does God work with humanity? And we want to basically trace the kingdom or the government of God on earth. And after the fall, who does God work with? Anyone? Okay. So basically, we still have Adam and Eve. Yes, go on.
I was going to say the same subjects because the story is continuing, and there are no the same entities are the same players. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Okay. So we still have the same people or the same entities, like Marshall said. And the difference is that there's sin, but the reason why we still have the same entities is because they were able to still work with God, right? Because if they did not want to work with God, God would have not worked with them, right? So we still have Adam and Eve, and we have a system that is established. Because of the fall, we have altars that have been put in place in which people are going to be sacrificing animals because of that sin. And we still have Adam and Eve still on the side of God, right? Does that make sense? Does anyone have a question on that? Okay, no one. Right. So after the fall happens and Satan hijacks the plan of God, I'll just say earth instead of Eden. So Satan hijacks the earth. And this is how Satan becomes, I don't know if I can say legitimately or illegitimately, the ruler of the world, right? But at the same time, we know that there is subjects that are on earth, right? And Satan needs to work with people on earth in the same way that in heaven, Satan needed angels, and Satan continues the same way of working. They also need people on earth, right? And here, God is working with Adam and Eve. And who is Satan working with? Someone?
The same Adam and Eve. Same Adam and Eve, isn't he? What you mean?
Cain.
Yes, thank you, Richard. Is working with Cain.
Oh, good God.
Remember, Adam and Eve, they basically, if I can say, repented, and they were still working with God, right?
Yeah.
So Satan starts working with Cain. Yeah. And through Cain, we have basically the establishment of Satan's government, if we can say. And at this point in time, it's not yet like an institution like we see now, but we can trace it back to those people. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So what then happens after that? We have the flood that comes. We're not going to look at all the individual people, but we're just going to look at a pattern. I think this is something that we have probably had in the movement for a long time. I'm not sure what we used to call it. I don't know if it's the working of if it's the mystery of iniquity and the mystery of godliness. I don't know what we used to call it. So we have the flood that happens. And after the flood, what do we have? Because before the fall, we have, before the flood, sorry, we have Adam and Eve, but through Adam and Eve, we have Abel, we have Seth, basically, because Abel was killed. We have Seth. And then Cain actually goes away from the family and also starts, like what Satan did in heaven. It's almost like what Cain did on earth as well, because he basically said, I don't agree with this whole thing of sacrificing animals and God expecting us to do all this, follow these laws that are so difficult and all, and this whole thing of the Sabbath. And he basically goes away and establishes a system that's different altogether, or if we can say a counterfeit to what God had established. So he basically starts worshiping on his own day in his own way, and he teaches his children to do the same thing until we come to a point where the earth is destroyed with a flood. And then after the flood, what do we have
I don't know
in
if this is
God's yes, go
sorry,
on.
can you hear me? Yeah. I just wanted to add with Cain. It came to mind, it's in Genesis 4:17, it says he went and builded a city. And I don't know if that's relevant that we could put it in there. There's some kind of, because I know when we used to study this, we talked about a city and a tower and church and state. So in a sense that I don't know if we'd say that the system of sacrificial service was an institution, that the sacrificial system is the institution that God sets up, and then Cain, in contrast, builds a city. I don't know what to do with that, but I thought it was interesting. So he's
Okay.
gone and set up his own system of worship, but he's become an unbeliever, basically, and goes and sets a city up, which was never God's plan, if you look at the whole system of country living and cities. And so I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay. So I'm just going to put it there as an interesting point. I find that interesting as well. I'll just put it there. I'm not sure what to do with it, but we'll just put it there because I think it's quite interesting. And I think it would also tie in with what happens after the flood, because after the flood, basically God works with, we see Abram, right? And with
Church.
Abram, this is, yes, go on.
Can I comment on the city? It's just a thought.
Okay.
Since we're looking at kingdoms, I was thinking you'd need to have a king, a city, and subjects. So in this story, it's interesting to see that Cain is a subject to Satan, and Cain then establishes the city of Nod. So I would think that would be like maybe the first example of what the um, what the kingdom, what Satan's kingdom uh, is looking like, and its location on Earth begins from Nod. Yeah,
Okay.
that was my thought.
Okay. That's interesting. I don't know if we can call it like a seed. It's like the inception, or yeah, the, if I can say, the DNA of what's going to come, or the seed of what's actually going to come later on. I don't know. That's how I'm thinking of it. So after the flood, we have Abram coming into play, and Abram basically becomes the inception of the Israelite nation, right? If we agree, this is where we have the inception of the Israelite nation, or we begin to mark the beginnings of the Israelite nation. Yeah. I also find it interesting, now that we're speaking about the issue of the city, that I don't think it was God's intention from the beginning to establish kingdoms. I know there is God's government, and this is something that we're going to see all the way, even with all the created beings. But the idea of kingdoms speaks to, I think to me, it speaks to the whole idea of having people organizing based on nationalities, and it sort of like leads you in a direction that pits people against each other and eventually has people putting each other in boxes based on the nationalities that they come from, and the discrimination that comes and all. That's what comes into my mind. I'm not sure if we can place it there, but
Can I throw
I just got to
a
mention
spanner in
that.
the works
Yes.
with that one, Gary? Didn't God do that? Use the languages of Babel, sorry. He sends all the people out speaking different languages. What are they going to do now? So I shouldn't say he does,
And
but we could say God does that. Obviously, it's a consequence of sin. You could, if you're talking about original intention.
yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm
Yes, I mean,
speaking about the intention.
it's also the same with patriarchy, isn't it? That it's not a good thing, but it was God that kind of instituted it, I guess.
Yes, I understand, but we are not going to get into that now. But I think it's interesting. We'll have to look at it a bit more and understand more what if we can say compare the. It's almost like we have reality versus expectation, sort of. Anyway, after that, we identify Abraham with the inception of the Israelite nation, and then what do we have with Satan's when we are tracing Satan's kingdom or Satan's government? On God's side, we have Abram, and then on Satan's side, what do we have, or who do we have? If anyone remembers. No one? Okay, we have Nimrod. I'm going to mark Nimrod. And Nimrod is where the beginning of the Babylonian kingdom is marked. I think this is something that we have always done, isn't it? This is the beginning. No, not Israel, sorry. The beginning of Babylonian kingdom. I don't know if people can see where I'm going with this. And we can mark Babel as well there. Does anyone have a question or something to add on there? Okay. So from there, so basically what we are seeing is that
Charity.
because, yes?
Sorry. I just thought of something before you proceed. Because I think with Nimrod, we see the beginning of this concept of monarchy.
Monarchy.
Which becomes significant because human societies had always organized in some way from the creation. But it's with Nimrod that we start seeing this concept of monarchy where a human actually stands up and makes claim to unlimited authority over people. Because I think that's the monarch. Nimrod basically, I know we say Nimrod took the place of God, but I think it's worse than that because it suggests that God exercises authority over people against their will. Because that's what monarchs do. Monarchs exercise their authority over people against their will. So I'm saying that's kind of different to God. It's similar in that, God has a claim over everyone, but God doesn't impose their rule on everyone. And monarchs do. That's what Nimrod did. Yeah. So I just wanted to point that the beginning of monarchy there was going to shape the direction that the government was going to go. The government of Satan was going to go. Whereas with Abraham, of course, it says that he commanded his house after him. But I'd like to believe that it wasn't completely against their will. It's difficult to see because it's still early days. But the testimony we have of Abraham is that he was a reasonable leader, mild leader, and when people would decide to do their own thing, Abraham wouldn't stop them. Yeah. Like with Lot, for example, we see Lot had been under the care and leadership of Abraham, but then when he wanted to do his own thing, Abraham didn't stop him, and even gave Lot um, the prerogative to choose which direction to go before himself. So, yeah, just marking that the governing style of the two kingdoms was beginning to emerge at that point.
Okay, thank you. I think something that's
sorry, just to support that back support, I put the verses about Nimrod in the chat, and it says first in verse 8 it says he began to be a mighty one in the earth. Then it says he was a mighty hunter. But the word for mighty one there in the translation of it is tyrant or warrior. So then it says tyrant or warrior for mighty one, and then the mighty hunter is a mighty warrior. So you can see that kind of idea of Apis Bull figure really, and what he's saying and what Blessing's saying about being a tyrant, a dictator.
Okay. Thank you, Emma and Blessing. I think it also brings out another point, because one of the reasons why we also need to understand these two types of governments is to see the characteristics of these governments, because it becomes important for us to identify the characteristics of God's government and the characteristics of Satan's government, to be able to tell the difference and to know how that can be, if I can say, replicated or embodied in the subjects of those governments. Yeah, because in some cases, like here, we can see the governments within the different kingdoms or the organized groups on earth. And there were not as many people at some point, and probably it was, I don't know if I can say if it was easier to see these two different groups of people. But with time, it becomes a bit harder to see the different groups. And how we are able to tell the difference is by looking at or tracing those characteristics and identifying what embodies God's government and what embodies Satan's government. And also keeping in mind that there is things that you can find on both sides. There's similarities and there's also differences. I guess that's why we even identify Satan's government as a counterfeit, because there's a close resemblance, but we still need to be able to tell that difference, right? So with the establishment of the monarchies, or the type of government that we see being established by Nimrod, if I can say, this is where Nimrod basically begins to bring this idea or this concept of authoritarianism or this way of doing things. Yeah. And then after that, because we have the beginning of the nation of Israel, so from there, I'm just going to basically jump all the way to ancient Israel. And with ancient Israel, of course, we have the beginning and the end. And this is how God basically is working with humanity. And we can see those nations or that nation as the embodiment of God's government. And again, it becomes important to identify those principles of God's government so that we are able to separate, the different things that are happening with the nation of Israel. And then with this one, we have the ancient kingdoms of Bible prophecy, if you want to say them. Say the ancient pagan nations. And the book of Daniel basically delineates the different nations that were representing Satan's government. And I think it becomes important as well for us when we are going to be doing that compare and contrast, when we parallel the nation of Israel and how we identify those different events and the different things that are happening with those different kingdoms, whether it's Babylon, Middle Persia, Greece, or Rome, so that we can see those different characteristics. Of course, we won't be able to do it now, but maybe at a later time we can start getting into some of that detail. I don't know if anyone has something to say on that. Okay. So from there, we have what we call the church in the wilderness. And the reason why I say the church in the wilderness is because it's not as simple as saying there are the Protestant churches, because before the Protestant churches, there was, a group of people as well that were representing God's kingdom. And we have in that time period as well, we have the, if I can say, papal Rome or the papacy. And we can also identify some of the turning points or the changes that are there. We can always look at it, but we have the whole issue of the separation of church and state that happens basically in this history, right? With the Omega of ancient Israel, we have that separation of church and state, right? Basically, it separates, and things begin to look a bit more different going this way than they were this other way, right? But with the on the side of the kingdom of Satan, that separation of church and states doesn't happen until later. But we also see it later because, of course, we know Satan is counterfeiting God's kingdom and also trying to keep relevant and establishing his kingdom on earth, right? So I think I'm not going to say much about that. Probably when we get more time, then we can go back and look at some of some of those things. And then from there, we have Adventism. And then lastly, the 144K. I'll just put it that way, but we can always flesh it out. And then here we have apostate Protestantism. Then, sorry if it's not clear, I'll try and make it a bit more clear next time. And then we have, at the end, I'm just going to say Trumpism. Right. So so what we have is we have these two types of governments that have been established on earth, right? And with the establishment of these two governments, they have always been, in contention. And we are identifying that, like I said, it's within the story of the great controversy, because this is the controversy that we're seeing between these two types of governments. And something that I would want to understand in connection with these governments is, first of all, why God has to work within an institution. Is it something that God wants to do, or it's something that has been there and, just trying to understand, okay, can't God work with one person? Why does God has to work with an institution? Because it also brings in the aspect of how salvation for us is going to be attained, if I can say. Is it through an institution, or it's something that can be attained at an individual level? Then if it's something that's individual, then why do we need institutions, right? And at the same time, Satan is also going to counterfeit what God is doing. Satan is going to have these different institutions as well. And what is Satan also bringing to the people, or what are they trying to do in connection with the story of the great controversy and challenging the government of God, right? And that's something that I would want us to explore a bit more and identify more detail with the different time periods that are on this line, identify the differences, and hopefully hope to get those answers for at least some of the questions that I have. So I
Charity,
don't
I
know
think
if
Blessing's got his hand up.
Oh, okay. Yes, Blessing, go on.
I wanted to direct our minds back to the, I don't know, it wasn't a line, but kind of like a comparison that you put a little further up in your notes.
Okay.
I don't know if you're able to scroll up to where you showed God and Satan. Oh, I don't know if you said God. Yeah, that one there.
Oh, this one. Okay.
Yeah. I think you scrolled up too much. Yeah, there we go. So God's government, Satan's government. I guess in answer to your question, my suggestion is that the issue that God has to
Which
deal with
question?
on the
Sorry.
institutions or individuals, is it something that God wants to just use institutions? Can it be achieved at an individual level?
Okay. Okay.
So I'm saying it has to be institutional, because that's what the challenge was. when Lucifer rebelled, Lucifer wasn't rebelling against the person of Jesus or the person of Christ. Satan was rebelling against the role of Christ and more broadly how the government of heaven worked. So it had to do with laws, rules, institutions. That's where the problem is. It's not an individual problem. So
Okay.
in trying to address the problem or have an argument over it, it's all about that. So yes, people that either run these institutions, governments, I'm using the term loosely, those that run these institutions and those that are impacted by those institutions are obviously affected. But if we're going to go to the core of the issue, I think it's an institutional, legal, law and rules related thing.
Okay. So you're basically identifying that when Satan is rebelling in heaven, they're rebelling against an institution. So whatever, so it shows the importance of that institution, and whatever is going to be achieved on earth, we have to correct that problem.
Yes, maybe. I guess I wasn't so much talking about its importance. I was just saying that's where the fight is. So it has to be there.
Okay.
Because Lucifer had a
Okay.
problem with it. So whatever God does, God has to address the issue at that level.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just going to put it down for hopefully next time that Lucifer so the controversy is over institution. Okay. Is there anyone with something burning before we close? Because I think I'm over time now. Something to add or to ask or clarify?
I was just wondering, I think you're going to leave to next time though, aren't you, how God dealt with the institution with Lucifer over the rebellion.
How God dealt with the institution over the rebellion.
Yeah, you put there Lucifer rebels against an institution. Like Blessing said, it wasn't in individuals such as, Christ. It was more about the structure of the institution. So I was wondering if you've got any points about how God dealt with that. I think we know, but
Okay. Yeah, I think we can look at it next time. Maybe I can write your question down so that I don't forget. Do you mean in heaven?
wherever blessing meant.
Pardon?
My question was sort of around what Blessing was saying. It wasn't about individuals, so wherever Blessing meant, we'll go from there. I liked what she said.
Okay. In connection with rebellion. Okay, I'll just put it that way. So that I remember. Okay. So I think we'll just end it here for today. And I know there's so many things that need to be fleshed out, and I hope we can continue this. So I'm just going to pray to close. Let's pray. Dear God, we're so grateful for the time that you've given us to look at this subject. And most times when we look at these complex subjects, we come out with more questions than answers. But we're also grateful for that because it helps us to question, study, and understand more how you work, your laws, the issues concerning our salvation, and your character. We pray, dear God, that you continue to be with us today and that we learn to trust more in you and your ways, and especially the methods that you use in communicating these messages to us in order for us to understand your character. We pray for a blessing upon each and every one of us, coming from all of us. We pray and ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.